Hi, and thank you for joining us for the Veterans History Project for the Library of Congress. I'm John Knotts, and it's the 1st of May. Yes, we've gotten through another month, and we're into 2016. We're here at the beautiful studios. I like to refer to them as beautiful because a lot of great people and great scenery. At Metro East Community Media in Gresham, Oregon. And I will say again, as far as I'm concerned, it's the gateway to the beautiful Columbia Gorge and the beautiful Columbia River. And I have a nice young lady sitting here with me by the name of Meloni Beauchamp. Mm-hmm. You said not Beauchamp,
right?
But Beauchamp.
Beauchamp, yes.
And we spoke just very briefly because we do a lot of these improv interviews. And I don't like to talk to folks a great deal before we get into an interview, and that makes them fun and interesting. So tell me something about yourself, because that's what we're here to do. Where you were born and where you spent the first few years of your life and where you went to school, and something about your mother and father.
Well, I'm the child of 2 Marines. So, Mom always said the witches brought him because she was taking my cousin around trick-or-treating.
And that's where she met. Brought them?
The witches brought him. So she met my dad on Halloween night because she was taking my cousin around trick-or-treating. So, but yeah, they were both Marines. So we lived in San Diego. I was born around there, and lived there till I was 15. We moved to Oregon a week before my 15th birthday, and I left for the Army a week after my 18th birthday.
What year was that?
1980.
1980, you left. You see, the reason I asked was, you were born where?
National City.
And I'm very familiar with National City.
You were a Marine.
Well, not only that, but in 1963, we moved to Gresham from Chula Vista, which was a lot different in 1963 and very livable.
Yeah, it's not so livable now.
A lot of tomato fields, a lot of farms, some Navy personnel. Beautiful, beautiful area. So my heart, part of my heart is still in the San Diego, Mission Bay, yes. National City area. I have fond memories of that and the Chargers showing up there when they first came down. All the misfits that turned out to be one heck of an AFL team then, the San Diego Chargers. And you went to school where?
In San Diego, I went to school, elementary and middle school, or high school, junior high at the time. And then we moved to Oregon right before I started 10th grade, and I went to South Albany High School.
South Albany, I'm familiar with South Albany. You moved just for your 10th grade year. I came between my sophomore and junior year.
Okay.
In 63, it was a culture shock then.
It was a very big culture shock in 1977.
In 77, going from Southern California to South Albany. I can imagine. Same feeling I had in first day in boot camp. What have I done to myself? Probably the same thought you had when you moved to Oregon.
Exactly. Well, and the same thought when I went to basic training myself.
Yeah, and that was another question I always like to ask, because you then, 3 years of high school here at South Albany High School. And what did you specialize in high school other than the general studies or athletics or theater or music? What were your interests in high school?
Reading, hanging out with friends. I didn't have a whole lot of goals. The Army helped me get some goals, so.
That's interesting.
My friends all had goals. I just didn't have them.
With your mother and father, your mother and father at that point in time, when did they meet, by the way, if you can remember?
Before I was born, obviously. Probably back in like 58, 59, somewhere in that vicinity.
And
I don't know, maybe 50.
How long in the Marine Corps?
Dad spent 14 years, Mom spent 7.
Oh, there you go. That's a long time.
Or 5. I think it was 7.
What were their MOSs?
Dad says he was infantry, but by the time he got out, he was data entry. And Mom did supply.
Who isn't 03?
Yes.
That's what they tell you. That's
exactly.
The first thing you will be.
Exactly.
Everything else is kind of on the periphery.
Exactly.
So you graduated from South Albany High School, and you were still at that point in time wondering what to do with your life. And you said you didn't have any goals at that time specifically. How did you decide on the Army or the military in general?
Was watching a TV show about flying that didn't last, but I said I would like to travel. Mom said, well, why don't you join the military? Plus it'll pay for college, what you want to do. So I looked at all the branches, At the time, I didn't realize there were a lot of nice islands that the Navy would send you to, because I figured I'd be stuck on an island in the middle of nowhere.
Maybe like Wake?
Yeah. Instead, I think I ended up in Fort Benning, Georgia. Lucky me. But
you didn't go to jump school then?
I did not.
You did not go to jump school. But you were in what now?
I was dental technician.
Dental technician, Army.
Right.
Army. So you chose the Army.
Right.
And you went to boot camp?
In Anniston, Alabama, September 1980.
Oh, Alabama.
Yep, Fort Rucker. Or, no, Fort McClellan, excuse me, Fort McClellan.
McClellan. That must have been named after a Civil War general.
Aren't they all?
You know, that's a good point. I shouldn't even have said that. I think they are. McClellan rang a name.
It was also where the Women's Army Corps was, and so they had the Women's Army Corps Museum there,
really?
too. Yeah.
So that's where the foundation for the Women's Army Corps was. And that was established. Do you know when that was established?
I don't. I know that the women were integrated with the whole Army around 77, 76, somewhere in that vicinity.
Okay.
Yeah,
okay.
so.
You got to boot camp.
No, I went to basic training. You went to boot camp.
Boot camp, basic training, indoctrination. Yeah, so they call that basic.
Right.
Basic training. And you, what did you learn in basic training, other than it's probably a place that you should have had second thoughts on the second day you were there?
I learned that you really can sleep standing up.
Good point.
I learned that I can do a lot more physically than my couch potato upbringing would have led me to believe. And to this day, I can still shoot and take apart an M16.
I hope you're all listening to this.
Hadn't shot one in, I don't know, 15 years before I deployed to Afghanistan, and they gave me an M14. It's the same, just about the same thing, just a little shorter. But
M14's wonderful.
Yeah.
14's wonderful.
Hadn't touched one in, like I said, 15 years, and it was easy to take apart and put back together.
Oh yeah, we had 14s, but then the 16s were coming out in Vietnam. But I carried
or M4, whatever they changed the place.
Well, they went to 15, 16s.
After the 16s, they came out to it's like 3 or 4 inches shorter, but
yeah, and lighter.
Yeah,
lighter than the 14.
It could have been a 4. I don't know. I don't
14
remember.
carried a good impact. And on the jungle, to go through the limbs. The 16 had ricocheted too much, so.
Yeah, they changed the name. I don't think it was a 14. I think it was. I don't remember what it was. It was whatever took the place of the M16.
M4.
Okay, it was whatever took the place of the M16.
Yeah, and they went to a lighter weapon and a higher velocity and a lot of different things.
But it was made the same.
So you, in fact, some of them. Now that you mentioned that, who made them? When you saw a weapon that said Mattel on it to begin with, it was a little scary. They did have Mattel on them in the early days. So you graduated from boot camp, basic training in the Army. And at that point in time, you're going to be what we call a grunt or infantry, because you really don't know where you're going to go. Or did they already have you assigned to an MOS?
Yes, I contracted for dental technicians, so I knew I was going to San Antonio as soon as I left basic training. Interesting.
So when you left basic, what other training did you have prior to going to training? Or
that's it. You do your basic training.
Went straight from basic to dental technician training.
Advanced individual training, and that was the first thing they do is they taught you to be a dental assistant, and then you did the dental technician class as a follow-on.
Okay.
So about 14 weeks of training.
So not
15
to a specialized career field, rather than any advanced infantry type stuff.
No, they just opened the infantry to the women recently in the last year or so. So that would not have been an option when I was going in.
But they did have some women that got to go through jump school.
Yes, and they had some that could go through, and field artillery was open for a short period of time too.
So they just had opened everything in the recent past.
Right.
For all infantry positions.
Right, all combat arms positions in all branches.
It's taken a few years and gone through a few steps to get to that point.
Quite a few, yeah.
So tell me about your experiences going through the dental training.
San Antonio is a great, fun place to be stationed. It was The dental school was slightly different than like the combat medics or some of the other programs. So essentially, it was almost like we were at our duty station. So we went to school, and then we were off for the evening and off on the weekends. The combat medics and a few of those others, it was like being in an extension of basic training. They were in uniform. Yeah, they had
That's what I was talking about. Was an extension of basic.
But mine was not. Mine was just a regular school.
San Antonio. Wow.
Oh, beautiful place.
Isn't there a lot of Air Force personnel down in and around San Antonio? And it's a great hospital from what I hear.
There is, yeah, Brook or something like that. Yeah, there's.
You've got Army Hospital, yeah. San Antonio. Yeah. You've got a lot of different things down there. Texas area. Yeah,
and San Antonio is one of the nicer areas of Texas too to be stationed at.
That's what I hear. I've had family member. My dad's brother was down there for quite a while after Vietnam, after World War II. San Antonio was in the medical field. In fact, was offered the administrator's job at Portland. Decided he wouldn't take it. So, yeah, that's good. And you then spent how many years in the military?
I have a total of 35 years in, but
holy mackerel, just blew me away there. 35 years.
About 7 of them were active duty, although I did my first 4 years as an enlisted on active duty. Then I went into the reserves, and then I switched over to the Guard after I commissioned because you don't get platoon experience in the reserves. It's very difficult to get it.
So 7 years originally?
No, 4 years originally, but a total altogether in that 35 years of about 7 years of active duty. That includes my deployment in schools.
So you had the solid 4. And during that first 4, after you finished your training, what was your first duty station?
Fort Benning, Georgia.
That's where you ended up at Fort Benning.
Mm-hmm. I cried.
Why did you cry?
I actually wanted to travel and not to Georgia. I wanted to go to Germany. I wanted to go overseas. I wanted to see something. So.
Nobody told you we're shipping you out to another country and you ended up in Georgia?
No, what they did was they made it worse. They asked you where you wanted to go, and I think they tried to send you to the polar opposite. Because I did put down Germany, and I'm like, Georgia, Germany, okay, they must have sounded alike, and they made a mistake.
I've heard that story. I don't know how true it is, where they'll send you 180 degrees from what you requested. So,
unless you get it in your contract, yes.
And so contracts, yeah. I remember we had one contract. You'll do what we tell you to do, and you'll go where we tell you to go.
That's the general.
There are no options. We'll go to strange, beautiful places and hurt people, but it's expense paid.
There you go. All my travels.
Yeah, all your travels are paid for, and your education, though. So, your time at Fort Benning was?
It was interesting. Looking back, it was interesting. I didn't really want to be there, so it took me a while for it to dawn on me that your time wherever you are is only as much fun as you want it to be. So when I decided to have a good time with my life, I had a good time. But met a lot of fun people, had a lot of good experiences. Was ecstatic when I was going to transfer to Panama. That's where I did my last 13 months on active duty.
Okay, at the end of the 4 years, went to Panama. My dad used to talk about Panama in World War II.
Yeah.
And Gatun Lake.
Mm-hmm. I got to...
called Gatun.
Because I was a dental technician, we had to do emergency dental care on nights and weekends. And we had the first mate and the captain of the ship, the USS Blakely. So they invited us to go through the canal with them. And the doctor that was the dentist that I was working with, and myself and some of my friends and some of his family all took him up on it, and we went. They took us 4 hours through the lake, so we landed in Gatun Lake and went home. But oh my gosh, that was fun.
How did you enjoy Panama? You said it was exciting.
I loved Panama.
What specifically?
Well, I like the tropics.
I'm with you there.
I like the sunshine. I like the heat. I had the most amazing friends. We went swimming in the beach. My first time in the beach, because we'd moved up to Oregon. So my first time in the Pacific Ocean, when I could actually go into the ocean and not die of frozenness, I just sat in there and I'm like, I'm back in the Pacific Ocean. Woohoo! woo! So I was pretty excited about
Another
that.
thing we have in common, yes, I've the Oregon coast, one of the beautiful coastlines
Oh, it's beautiful,
in
but
the country, but
it's way too cold.
Very seldom have been to the beach in a bathing suit, usually a parka or a sweatshirt with a hood, and hiding behind something if I have a bonfire to cook hot dogs because the wind is blowing and the sand is blowing in your face. Yes, I'm with you on that. You got to go back down to Mission Bay and Laguna Beach and the California beaches. So, so I can relate to you on the beaches, and you really enjoyed Panama. So, did you surf? Did you dive?
I did not. I tried water skiing, but I don't have the kind of balance that it takes to come up. So, but I did. I snorkeled and I swam and I played and I hiked and I went camping a couple times and
at that point, you were what rank?
E4, E3 and E4.
okay.
Yeah,
There you
E3
go.
and E4.
Very good.
So.
And then you, anything else you remember about Panama?
Gets dark at 6, it gets light at 6, it starts pouring down rain at about 2 o'clock in the afternoon. It
Really?
rains to about 2:45, 3, and they get about the same. I've read that they get the same annual rainfall that Oregon gets. It's just that they have the common decency to do it in an hour a day as opposed to drizzling for 9 months.
We'll have to find out who schedules that and have that done up here.
No kidding.
The tropical rains, I notice, about the same in Hawaii. If you had a storm, maybe an hour with exception, rain flooded the streets, you stand under protection for a little while and the sun's out and it dries up. That's what I like about the tropics.
You and me both.
So yeah, that's an interesting look at the weather. Dad talked about diving in Gatun Lake and free diving. It's quite a challenge, and some islander there that had no hearing whatsoever after diving all those years, but he could go down who knows how many feet free diving.
No wonder he.
Absolute record why he didn't have any hearing anymore. But I hadn't heard that name since Dad passed. Gatun Lake. I've heard it mispronounced on some history programs. So.
I'm sure you have, yeah.
Yeah.
We jumped into the Galliard Cut one time. That's like a 30-foot drop. I'm a little bit afraid of heights, so it took me a while, but it was fun.
That was to get to the water.
Yes.
Obviously a cliff or a hill is something that you would go feet first into. And what was that experience like?
Scary as all get out. I'm a little bit paranoid of heights, and I'm kind of a control freak, so.
But you were in the military, and your mindset said, I'm going to do this.
I did, and I'm so glad I did.
Something you wouldn't do in your normal state of mind as a civilian.
Well, now I would.
Now, then it was like, yeah, I'm going to do it. I'm invincible. Whatever I'm asked to do. So I can understand that too. That's do it. If you hadn't, you'd wonder what it would have been like.
Exactly.
So you finished your time there and came back stateside.
I did. I had thought about going to school elsewhere, but my dad had a heart attack the week before I was supposed to get out. So I thought it would be best to hang out in Oregon for a while.
Okay, so you actually detached from the military. Where?
From Panama, and then
from Panama.
Yeah, that was my last duty station. Well, then I came back to Fort Lewis at the time, now Joint Base Lewis McChord, but and that's where I did the final out processing. But yeah, it took less than a week.
So you had mentioned earlier 35 years total military time. Did you come back and go back to school to finish a degree?
I did. As soon as I got into the reserves as soon as I could find a unit when I got back. So I was out for about a month. I went back in October. I started drilling.
So you went to a reserve unit here.
I did.
Where was that?
I was with the 45th Station Hospital. It was out of Vancouver. They've been disbanded or they've gone away since then. But yeah, so I was there as a dental technician. It was kind of fun. We did dental assisting at Multnomah County Detention Center so that we would actually get to do some dentistry. So that was kind of interesting.
Downtown.
Yeah, so that was pretty interesting. That's where I realized that looks don't matter because you can't tell from looking at someone what kind of crime they did.
No, interesting observation. You can't.
No, you would think that someone that committed some kind of heinous sexual crime would look like a Neanderthal, but no.
Doesn't work that way.
No, it doesn't.
Let me ask you this. After that experience and what you just said, not really being able to judge character from a brief encounter.
Or by looks either.
Or by looks. I think the scary thought is, how many people do we encounter in our everyday life that are along those lines or sociopathic?
Mm-hmm.
Or I'm just the lucky one that they didn't kill.
Exactly.
Or rob. How many are running around on the streets we don't know anything about?
Well, some of them are quite functional too.
Therein lies the problem.
Yeah.
And
they can emote. They don't feel it, but they can act out emotions, and people think that they're totally normal.
That's scary.
Mm-hmm.
Interesting observation on your part. Did you finish any schooling at that point or since then?
I did. I finished my bachelor's degree, went through ROTC. I did a year at Multnomah School of Multnomah, the Bible College.
I was going to say Multnomah
yeah, School of the Bible. They changed it.
Yes.
Yeah, they've changed their name since then. But and then I transferred to Western Oregon State College at the time, WASC, and started with the ROTC program. So I was actually cross-enrolled with the Oregon State University program. And I was one of the last of the what they called the early commissionees, where you didn't have to be academically aligned. They went a few more years after mine, but one of the last classes. And so I was commissioned in '87, but I didn't graduate until '89.
Okay.
So,
and commissioned, for our listening audience, commissioned
as a second lieutenant.
As a second lieutenant.
Right, as a reserve lieutenant.
A reserve lieutenant from an enlisted status.
Right.
You can achieve officer status.
You can indeed.
You can go to OCS, field commissions. There are a number of ways to become an officer if you endeavor in that direction. And that's wonderful to hear. Yeah. So you were commissioned out of Western Oregon.
Yeah, right.
And let me backtrack to Multnomah School of the Bible, I think it was.
Yes, it was.
Off of 82nd, I believe.
In Gleason.
But I thought about going there years and years ago.
It's a good school.
Don't have a clue why. In fact, I had a lot of friends that knew me that couldn't figure out why. But yeah, that's interesting to hear those names. And Western Oregon College, like Portland State College, PSC when I was there, university now. So then you finished at Western Oregon in the dental area?
No. Double major in humanities and psychology.
Okay, so you had at that point gotten away from the dental.
No, I was done with dental.
No aspirations to continue in the dental field or become a dentist or continue in that field?
No.
Why?
At the time, I had planned on going back on active duty, and you couldn't do that as a dental hygienist. Thankfully, I did not do that. I went reserves because that's how I met my husband and had a happy life here in Oregon. And
so was he also in?
No, he was. Well, yeah, he was. He spent 30 years on active duty. His entire time was active duty. I had graduated.
We could have brought you in here together to do this.
Not exactly. He passed away on the 5th of March.
Well, I'm sorry to hear that.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah. Just this year?
Yes.
Oh, no.
Yeah.
What was wrong?
Heart, which may or may not have been service-connected. He was 20 years older than I was, and he was in Vietnam, and he got shot, and he didn't seem to have any problems, but he didn't recover from what should have been a routine surgery, so.
Happens more than once.
Yeah, so.
I'm really sorry to hear that. I'm sure the crew, I just don't like those stories, but
well, you know
it's part of life.
Very happy time together.
You can't hide it. Remember the good stuff.
I told I'm still friends with the professor of military science that commissioned me. He lives in Corvallis, he and his wife. And anyway, I told him it was his fault that Charlie and I got together. And he's like, how do I get the blame for that? I said, because I was happily ensconced at WASC and I wasn't bugging you guys and I wasn't doing anything, and you ordered me to start hanging around the ROTC program and doing physical training with everybody.
So
and
that's where you met, and he was involved.
He was the sergeant major for the ROTC program. So he was there already teaching, and that's where we actually got to know each other, because I used to go over there, do my time, go back to school. Never spent much time there until Colonel Rainbolt ordered me to do PT with everybody.
So your husband was 30 years?
Active duty, yes.
Active duty, 30 years active duty.
2 tours in Vietnam.
And to his credit, that's a long time, and Sergeant Major.
Mm-hmm. He had he was commissioned for a while, but he was one of the ones that got riffed after Vietnam.
Yeah.
He didn't have his degree, but he got it later, so.
It's Army?
Yes.
Army, okay.
Oh, yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I know.
Yeah, he was an amazing, amazing husband. He still called them his cadets, and he kept track of their careers and knew what was going on with them. And you know what? My daughter's in ROTC, and her NCO doesn't seem to have that same dedication. But you know what? An NCO that puts time and commitment and shows as much caring as he did can really, really, really impact how officers and NCOs work together. Mm-hmm. Because you didn't start out with an adversarial reaction to NCOs when you had someone that was professional teaching you, and that wanted you to do your best, and didn't think you were a pain because you were a lieutenant.
Sergeant Major's earned it.
Yeah.
That's the one rank in the military that many of the officers, if not all, should, if they don't, have a whole lot of respect for.
Oh yeah, yeah.
And if they don't, they're not a real good officer and not a real sharp leader.
No.
That's the respect that I have to your husband,
yeah.
Sergeant Major. Anytime I hear that, time in grade, man, time in the service. You have to give the respect when it's due. Again, like I said many times before, I refer to it as unheralded people, unheralded achievements that nobody knows about, and the people that did it don't talk about it. They don't talk about it. They just did what they had to do in life. And no heroes, just hardworking people that care about other people. And I think the thing that you mentioned about the leadership qualities, that they're still his troops, they're still still has an obligation to look over them. But I think that comes from any outside of the military decent human being.
Well, yeah.
That has that mindset. That's just the way I look at it. So, it's kind of tough. Getting me kind of teary-eyed here.
He was an amazing person.
So your time down there, and to tell me something about the remainder of the 30-plus years you've had in the reserve and
Well, I did reserves for about 2 years after I was commissioned, and I liked it. I was with the, by that time I was with the 104th Division. They did basic training.
Yes.
So they had one company that worked with non-infantry basic trainees, and so I was in that company. I liked it, but I wanted platoon leader experience, so I transferred over to the National Guard, was with the 12th 10th Transportation Detachment.
Okay.
I actually, that's what I went to school for, as being a transportation officer. That wasn't a real good fit for me, but I have difficulties with directions, not following people's directions, but east and west and left and right. I've always had a problem with that since I was a kid. So
Why?
I tend to transpose numbers and things like that. So
really?
I don't know why, but possibly a form of dyslexia, but not from.
I was going to say, have you been diagnosed with dyslexia?
But I don't have it for reading, because I can read backwards, forwards, upside down, in the dark, and any way you think about it. So.
But east and west and.
Yeah, east and west. The
I've
directions.
Never heard that.
Yeah, I have no sense of numbers, so I could march, but I had to follow very carefully. I can clap if I watch very carefully, but I have no sense of rhythm other than that. It's kind of a weird, I'm an odd duck.
No rhythm.
Yeah, no rhythm. So it was. So
if someone handed you a compass, it wouldn't.
I could teach you how to do land nav. It's simple. I couldn't do land nav.
Yeah. I never really got, when we went through all the compass training and the azimuths and the this and that and shooting in azimuths and all these terms, I went,
that whole thing.
Too much for me, so I'm with you on that.
It totally made sense. I just couldn't apply it when I stepped out on the ground because circles and squiggles are not hills, and because it didn't translate into my mind.
I find out where I'm at now.
GPS?
Immediately, if the sun is over my head, I'll say, give me about 20, 25 minutes. And I'll know which is east and west. Right now, I don't know.
Good to know someone else has it.
If it's right, so if it's right in the middle, in a few minutes, depending on where it goes, I'll know where west was.
There you go. And I've kind of got an idea as we grew, because I'm either heading to California, Virginia, or Washington, so. Or to the beach.
Well, it's pretty easy going up and down the I-5 corridor. If you go too far west, you're in the water, and if you go too far to the other direction, you don't find any water, and you've fouled up someplace.
Exactly. So, but it was fun. I enjoyed it. I was with. I stayed in the detachment for a while, then I went up to a supply and services battalion. So I was still doing transportation because I can do the management part of it. It's just the directions part that I had a hard time.
So you were at Lewis at that time?
No, I was at Clackamas up at. I was still in the Guard, so I was up at Clackamas.
So you were with them?
Yes, Camp Withicum, yeah.
Because it's my understanding that we don't have any active...
no, we have no active...
Army Reserve.
It's Army Reserve. There's not too many of those left. There's a few.
That's what I hear.
There's just a couple units, more headquarters and stuff. And... but they have Guard all over the state. So actually my civilian job ties in with the military. I'm the military one-source consultant for Oregon, so I go around to all the different units, and that's why I attend that meeting that we were talking about earlier.
So military one-source, and you work for the state?
No, this is a program that's funded by the Department of Defense, and what it does is it provides to all currently serving service members and their families. They do have to be currently serving. They can be 180 days off, ETS, separating from service or retiring. They can be in the IRR. They can be a cadet or midshipman on scholarship, or there's a few other qualifiers. They don't have to have deployed. They just have to be. They can be the Guard, the Reserve, the active duty. And what it does is they've got non-medical counseling. They've got certified financial planners that will work with them. They can talk to health and wellness coaches. They can access libraries and articles, and it's just an amazing array of resources. And when I returned from my deployment, honestly, I had such a good deployment, I wanted to give back to the military, and when this position opened, I'm like, I left 18 years with the state to do it. So
what did you do with the state?
I left my PERS intact, and I went on my merry way. So I've been doing this for about 5.5 years. So.
Okay. Now, what did you specifically do with the state other than
I was an employment specialist.
Okay.
So I worked with people trying to help them find jobs, which, even when I was deployed, people are like, well, I don't know what I'm going to do when I get back. And I would help them find their state's services and tell them about unemployment for the state and all that other information. So I've always been able to use the information, which is why I've liked all the jobs I've had, because I've been able to tie them into everyday life.
Interesting point, because I expressed this at a Veterans Advisory Council meeting several years ago, that my perception was, and I've mentioned this several times, that when we came back, we naturally expected to have a family, get a job, buy a new 60s car, and everybody had a muscle car, a custom car, and go on with life. That was just normal, to be expected. Bury everything else, regardless of the acceptance that a lot of the Vietnam vets experienced. We went on with life. There were jobs. There were jobs. You could walk down the street and say, I'm looking for a job. with the deployments we see today with no draft, and I've mentioned this before, and I hate to be repetitious, but it seems to be a problem, the 3, 4, and 5 deployments, and come back. And if one could find a direction and find a job and had goals that they could set out, but I think the jobs are so scarce. It's harder now to come back and find a meaningful direction to go. One, not knowing when you're going to get deployed next, or to get anything substantial and find a direction to put your feet on the ground. How do you feel about that?
I both agree and disagree with you. There are employers coming out of the woodwork trying to hire people that are coming back.
Now, more all the time.
Well, yeah. But,
absolutely.
and they put together opportunities for people. They've got 3 or 4 or 5, 10 different programs that work with returning veterans, trying to get them back to work. You have to want to go back to work. Now, some of them have jobs and they just keep going back to their jobs. Some of them want to take advantage of having earned the GI Bill, the post 9/11 GI Bill, so they want to go to college, which is always a good thing. I mean, it helps them to make other decisions and other choices. But I told you when I went into the military I had no direction. I had to develop direction. I had to set up goals. I had to get going. So it's the same thing. If people don't realize that they don't accomplish it, if you aim at nothing, you're going to hit it every time.
Exactly. Yeah.
So it's trying to get people to set those kinds of goals. The helicopter parenting that's going on, I think, is kind of affecting our young service members. They're used to their parents hovering over them and taking care of everything. Yeah.
Yes, it kind of
really do that in the military.
It kind of circles back to that. Everybody's a winner. Everybody gets a trophy, and we had to go out and learn about life.
Yeah, and you
live, find, take your lumps and bumps.
Accept responsibility for the dumb things that you do. You can do dumb things, just accept responsibility for the consequences of
and
those
now
dumb things.
Today it's everybody perceives a perfect world, and regardless of what you think of, your perception is it's not a perfect world. Yeah, I agree with you. So I'm glad you said that, that we need that direction for the young people. And you don't, college is not a right.
No.
Healthcare is not a right. You can earn those things. You can put yourself in a position to acquire those, and that's I think part of the growth process. Because we earn those things.
Right.
My compliments to you. You have earned those things from someone who admittedly didn't feel you had a direction, but yet you did, and you made a lot out of it.
I did, and the military's been good to me, so I have nothing to complain about. And perhaps it's because my enlisted job was dental, and you had to have some decent scores to get into it, but I was not harassed. Not sexually harassed. I was, tormented for being a private, and I was tormented for being a lieutenant, but not for being a female lieutenant, not for being a female private.
Now your current rank is
Lieutenant Colonel. I retired in June.
Oh.
The reason I have,
oh yes, well, boy, my plaudits to you, a Lieutenant Colonel.
Right.
Mm-hmm. I have great respect for that. So you went from lieutenant, and we got to the finale here as Lieutenant Colonel.
We did indeed. And some of that was being in the right place at the right time, because I could have done my 20 and gotten out. But I hit 20 and I'm like, well, I don't want to get out. Then it just feels like I stayed in here to get a retirement. Plus, I liked what I was doing a lot. I was a company commander.
Why?
I was a company commander. I really enjoyed it. And then of course 2001, and my time was September, so 2001 hits, and I'm like, now everybody'd think I was afraid of this war going on, and because my first 20 years were all Cold War.
Yeah.
And but you know what, I enjoyed my career so much more from about 2000 and on, because it was exciting, it was interesting, it helps to get some rank because you get more interesting and fun jobs, but it was, and the thing that kept me in the military the entire time anyway was the people. I like military people. They're fun, they're fascinating, they can be serious as all get out and then go off and blow off some steam. The one time that I considered getting out, it was because it was a unit and I really didn't like the people. And then I changed units and I was happy again. I was productive and busy. And
that military life, I know I heard it from my dad and from family members, and that I think you can't talk about it, you can't feel it. You can only experience it. There is something there.
There is, and I mean, it's almost time. I can't imagine that I can't imagine I would have gotten to go to Egypt or Korea or Panama or obviously Afghanistan if I hadn't been in the military, because I went with the military. I got to go to Virginia. I spent 3 summers there. I like summers in Virginia. I don't know if I'd like a winter. I love the summers.
It's beautiful. I went through there in 2009 on a motorcycle going back to Washington, and I thoroughly enjoyed the scenery in West Virginia and Virginia.
It's very pretty.
I was amazed. What they call tall trees. How do you like our trees? I said, well, these actually, compared to Oregon, they're like bushes, but they're trees.
But they're pretty.
But it is pretty.
I was at Fort Eustis, Virginia for the Transportation Basic course and the Transportation Advanced course, and I was at Fort Lee for a Quartermaster Logistics course. So.
Fort Lee must have been named after another
go.
General.
So was Fort Eustis. And
so I was going to say, Eustis rings a bell. It's like,
you get to do a lot.
It's like Farragut, the campground on Naval Station up in Idaho, and nobody knows about. Farragut, named after, There must have been an Admiral in Farragut.
I think so. Yeah, and I did my, I switched to admin, so I was a personnel officer, and I did that. I went to school for that actually in Alexandria, Virginia, so had about a 3 or 4 week course to get an area specialty, and then I spent the rest of my career. In fact, I spent my tour in Afghanistan. I was at Mazar-e Sharif, in that area, Camp Mike Spann, and I did public affairs, and I did, and I was in the J1 charge of personnel for the whole area, and then I was transferred down to Kabul, and I did again personnel for the last 6 months that I was in country.
Okay.
But I got to the public affairs was fascinating because I got to go out to see dedications, some school dedications. I got to you couldn't have. I mean, yes, we had some awful stuff that went on. You can't help that in a war zone. But the Afghans that I worked with, they wanted to do their jobs. I mentored the public affairs when I was at Camp Mike Spann and the G1, the personnel officer for at Kabul. They wanted to do their jobs, and they wanted to do their jobs well, and they took a lot of pride in doing their jobs well. I have no inter-service rivalry left because I worked with the Navy. Well, the Marines still try to stay exclusive, but I worked with the Air Force Reserve Active Duty Guard. I worked with the Army Guard Reserve Active Duty, Navy, same thing. And amazing. They were just tremendous human beings. I have so much respect for them.
Well, they do so much of the same thing anymore.
Well, yeah, and we were all working together for a common goal. My room the room that I had in Afghanistan was a 6x10 plywood section. So there were six spaces. They never took away our living area like they did on all the others, but that's because the colonel in charge of it, he was at the back of our building. He had his own room, but you have to have, those things are made out of plywood. They're made out of Afghan plywood.
It's amazing what you can call home.
Yeah, and they're painted with Afghan paint, which is cut with gasoline. So you have to have access and egress doors at both sides of the place. You can't have just one door going out because that thing, if it burst into flames.
So they break the paint down with gasoline.
Yes. So
they don't have lacquer thinner paint, enamel thinner. reduce or anything.
Exactly. But I'll tell you
Amazing.
what.
It works though.
Now, the guys' bunks, when I had to yell in for them, still smelled like guys' bunk rooms, but we women turned ours into a thing.
That's a good thing to hear. I want everybody to hear that. That their rooms had a much better fragrance than the guys.
Well, we decorated them, for Pete's sake. You got to make it home.
I want to know, before we leave today, I want to know about Egypt. You mentioned Egypt. What was your experience in Egypt?
I went there with a Bright Star. It was a training exercise that they used to do. It was a transportation training exercise. So I was there with the it's a disbanded unit now, but they had the airport ports of embarkation and debarkations, and so I was with them working with that unit, and so we were over there for about 3 weeks. Worked with the Egyptians, worked with the New York Reserve Unit. They were unique. It's where I discovered that the Air Force had managed to figure out a way to put flush toilets out in the field with a tent and running water to wash your hands. I was like, dang.
But it's new technology.
Maybe everybody was right. Maybe I should have gone into the Air Force.
Not half of a 55-gallon drum and put diesel fuel in it and throw a match in to clean it out.
Exactly.
Yeah,
we had only one person complaining when I was in Afghanistan, and she wasn't fond of everything. And I thought, you haven't taken a shower on a pallet in a tent when they had to, when they give the women a half an hour to go take a shower, where they've got one pole with a whole bunch of shower heads coming down. You haven't had to get your water and put it into a canteen. We have showers, and we have toilets, and we have bottled water. You have nothing to complain about. I wish, like I said, even though the Air Force made it a little bit nicer, because they even had air conditioning in their tents, they still, I've been out to the field where we didn't have that, and that's what I expected.
I thinking I was blessed to walk through a river in the Long Thin Land, as we referred to it. It wasn't French Indochina or South Vietnam. It was the Long Thin Land. And this is the world, and that was the Long Thin Land. And I've never heard that in the movie. But I was glad to walk through a river periodically and wash off before I got to the other bank. And I always prayed that there were water buffalo upstream, because we drink as much as we could and bathe in it. And I figured if water buffalo was, I could get sick enough to get shipped out.
There you go.
It's interesting the thought process you go through.
Oh, I'm sure you do.
See water buffalo? I'm bathing here.
Pete, please. My husband and I stopped at Yellowstone on the way back from Virginia. I can't remember if it was the first time or the third time I was there. And he told me that the craters, the craters reminded him of the bomb craters over in Vietnam. They used to bathe in them to get clean.
You have to fill canteens with muddy water.
Yeah, they were a little bit more careful. They also
fill
told
a canteen and brushing the leeches away.
He also told me that, everybody goes, well, I was in Vietnam, I don't eat rice. And he's like, really? It's an American diet. My friend he had a friend.
They don't eat
friend,
rice?
No, the people that came back from Vietnam, because they said, oh, they ate so much of it there. And my husband's like, really? Because my friend, who was also Puerto Rican, and I had to beg for a bag of rice to keep in the thing so that we could cook rice instead of having to eat potatoes all the time.
They ate too much rice, therefore they don't like rice now.
Yeah, that's what they said. But he didn't see how they could do that, because he said they ate, the military supplied their food, and the military supplies potatoes.
Unless they were in a back area in Saigon someplace, and they went to a restaurant, they might have had some rice, so they went on R&R to Okinawa, they might have had some rice.
But other than that, they had potatoes.
That's rather odd, isn't it?
Yeah. So he had some fun stories to tell about his time in Vietnam, and I had some fun stories to tell about my time. They didn't quite. His were a little bit more exciting than mine were.
What keeps you alive?
The book.
The fun parts.
The book. He was at Illingsworth, Fire Support Base Illingsworth. They've got a couple books about that and how they were overrun.
A lot of books coming out now on different battles, conflicts, and things like that.
Yeah. So.
Before we wrap here, I did want to mention that you are still volunteering, serving on the Veterans Advisory Council. Are you still involved?
I'm still a guest there. I go to all of those I go to all the meetings that I can go to, because that's part of my job is to make sure that there are resources available for the military people, and to know them I need to go in there to those meetings. So I am as actively involved as I can be within the guidelines of our contract.
Okay. Okay, so you're not officially
No.
on the VAC, which
No.
you don't need to be?
No, but I can
think.
attend the meetings. I think I'm trying to go again to the next one.
Pick up some general information.
Yeah, and just meet some amazing people at these meetings. People throughout the state that they care so much. It's such a...
There are a lot of
rewarding.
unexpected, unknown people off stage, so to speak, that are doing a lot that you never hear about.
Exactly.
Because a lot of times, and I hate to put it this way, we do have to go around the bureaucracy, and it's still individuals that are making these things get done.
Exactly.
And so my heart goes out to all of them, and I got some exciting things coming up.
They do.
I want to talk to you about, and to make you aware of for the future what's going on with several organizations. So we're going to say goodbye for now. And it's been a pleasure and
Thank you.
an honor to say Lieutenant Colonel Meloni Beauchamp.
Exactly.
And Beauchamp rings a bell because I remember, if you watched the Unforgiven, Beauchamp was the writer.
Oh, okay.
And that's why I remember that name, Beauchamp. Mr. Beauchamp, he wrote books. Interesting if you've seen that show. We're going to say goodbye for now. Thank you for joining us on the Veterans History Project. And again, thank you, Meloni, Lieutenant Colonel Beauchamp. I love saying that because you earned it and you deserve it, and people need to know about it. And until next time, you have a safe journey wherever life leads you.
All right. Thank you very much. Appreciate your
You're welcome.
taking your time with me. So.